Hi, my name is Christine, and this video is the final project for my course, Deconstructing the IEP. Thank you so much for watching, and I would be very happy if you have any feedback to offer. So the intended audience of my project is my 8th grade teaching team and the administration at my school. The goal is to introduce and get permission to execute my action research project, which I hope will be successful over time and ultimately change the culture of special ed at my school. So I was really struck by information I read in Module 3 about students taking a lead role in their IEP meetings and the positive implications of that. So a reoccurring sad theme for me about students with disabilities is the shame that they carry. Because of shame, some of my students will not use the accommodations that they're legally entitled to, such as a reading pen, a separate location for testing, or their tests being read out loud. So I have several students who bristle when any service provider suggests some new accommodation which might really help them. For example, Google Read and Write to help them with their spelling, because they see it as being offensive or a criticism. So based on the data I read in some articles in Module 3, an antidote to this shame could be students taking ownership of their IEP process, even if it's just in incremental forms. So it's interesting to me because when I began this course, I had absolutely no plan or interest in having an action research project, but I was really moved by the information that I read, and I feel like implementing this research project could really address some weaknesses that I see in the special ed program at my school, which is not a criticism of my school because I think it's a reflection of our society and how we look at students with disabilities. So my action research project title is How Can We Have More Honest and Open Conversations with Students and Their Families about their learning disabilities in order to create an atmosphere of autonomy and advocacy, creating a culture of normalizing and celebrating special ed students and their education, and thus replacing a culture of shame. So the first recommendation I have is that we include transition planning in our IEPs from 6th grade on. So there are many components to the IEP. Not every school includes every component because I guess it could get very long. However, I feel like it's really important to have transition planning so there is a plan that the student is working toward beyond school, beyond high school. So I read a lot of information from the IRIS Center at Vanderbilt University, and an example that a special ed teacher who wrote a paper for that site wrote was that there was a 9th grade student who said he was interested in a career working with animals. So they put that in his transition planning section of his IEP, and the goal was within the next year, he was going to visit 6 animal related workplaces, and the IEP, the teacher writing the IEP was going to help him with that, contact those people, and he was going to visit each of these, and then afterward he was going to make a list of his likes and dislikes about each environment and create some kind of artifact or project. So this is really powerful to me because it really encourages life skills, and it encouraged this student to take agency and start to develop his path beyond high school. So because I worry about some of my students' ability to pass the Regents exams and thus graduate from high school, I find transition planning to be very, very important. It's a question, is it realistic for this student to plan to go to college? Would this student like going to college? Might they do better preparing for the workforce or some kind of skill or trade that they would really enjoy beyond the classroom? Um, a really important point is that before a student can take leadership of their IEP meeting, they have to have an understanding of their own disability and how it affects their performance. So there was a very interesting paper by a teacher named Hannah Nolan Spohn. She was in a new position and meeting a student for the first time in the weeks before his IEP meeting to plan. And she said to him, "So how does your disability affect your learning?" And the student said to her, "What is a disability?" And she explained what a disability was and said, "Well, I see from your IEP that you've been diagnosed with autism." And the student said, "What is autism?" So I really felt a connection to this because my students do not advocate for themselves very well, and I believe it is our fault, the adults' fault, because we have never sat down with them one-on-one and had an honest conversation about their disability. So a student cannot feel comfortable about an aspect of themselves that they might consider to be negative if they don't own it. And there is no way for them to own their disability if they are not well informed and educated about it. A few years ago, I had a student who had a stutter. And fortunately for her, her parents were wonderful advocates and had done a lot of research and reaching out to professionals. So this student was part of stuttering associations. She went to conferences. She went to camp every summer with other people who stuttered. So she was so knowledgeable about her own disability that when anyone made fun of her, she would say things like, "Well, yeah, I have a stutter. I've always had a stutter. I may always have a stutter. Scientists really don't understand the reason why people have a stutter. I do go to speech therapy. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't." And by that point, because she had no shame about her disability, the person making fun of her had no idea what to say because it wasn't a huge problem for her because she owned it. So research has also shown that students become more active participants, monitoring and evaluating their progress toward their IEP goals, so their annual goals. If they're involved in this process, they learn to set appropriate goals. They monitor their own achievement and make decisions based on their performance. A student really should be aware of their own goals. Sometimes this IEP just becomes an arbitrary document that really is not looked at in between yearly IEP meetings, except in a panic before it needs to be read. But the goals need to be carefully considered and agreed upon between the student, the family, and the ICT teacher, as well as the whole team. They should be meaningful. So, students who lead their IEP meetings are better informed about their own academic status. They're better self-advocates. They have more self-confidence. They have increased engagement in the classroom, better academic skills, which lead to better employment outcomes. So what seems like something really small involving the student in the IEP process more actively can actually have huge implications for a student's life. So in this paper by Hannah Nolan Spohn, she also talks about this quote: "Student self-advocacy pulled back the curtain of the taboo of special ed. We as a society do not know how to speak about special ed constructively or matter-of-factly. There are a lot of feelings involved for all parties, but especially for the students. So this tension about the topic and not talking about the elephant in the room creates problems for the student because they see their disability as something that can't be talked about, should be hidden, and therefore is shameful." So my final project will address all of these, because with very specific annual goals and viewing the IEP as a living, breathing document to be referred to often, the student will focus on their annual goals. The student mastering their annual goals will bring them to the next level, and therefore they will be successful in their classes. So by taking ownership of these goals, the student will be more involved in their own learning and therefore more successful. So after viewing this video, I have some questions for my viewers, which again would be my 8th grade team and my administrators. I would like to do this survey through SurveyMonkey, and I would like to do it on the spot because I would like to analyze the answers and, just like quickly tally them and bring up answers that people gave so we can discuss them as a group. The first question I have is, at what age do you think it is appropriate to include transitional planning in our school's IEPs? Note, it is not currently in our middle school IEPs. Would you agree with me that 6th grade is an appropriate time to start thinking about it, or do you have another idea? 2, what ideas do you have about how we can better communicate information to students and families about a student's disability? 3, since we are a pre-K through 12th grade school, should we streamline how, when, and with whom these conversations should begin taking place? 4, at what point in a child's education should we begin speaking to them about high school and whether or not continuing at our school is in their best interest, especially if, given their disabilities, it is unlikely that they will be able to pass the Regents exams and therefore get a diploma from high school? Again, thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.